I'm a big believer that people get more out of their healthcare when they put more into it energetically. That doesn't necessarily have to be cash, but it can be going to the lab, donating some blood to the lab, giving your time, giving up of yourself to get that information is an investment in energy into your health. So I found when people do that actually they are then more committed to their health and to the process with you. And they were more likely to give me a longer period of time to work with them because of that.
Hello, and welcome to the Cash-Based Practice Podcast, a production of drjarodcarter.com, aimed at giving physical therapists and other healthcare practice owners the information needed for success in the private pay business model. And now, here's your host, Jarod Carter.
Hello, and welcome back. Thank you, as always, for joining. Today's episode is an interview with Dr. Morgan Camp, who is a functional medicine practitioner in California, and also a very dear old friend of mine. We figure we met first probably in 1998 or 99, and it's been really cool. He was already a physician at that time, and I wasn't even out of undergrad, so it's been cool to remain friends through the years and also kind of track each other's progress and practice. And he's had not one, but two functional medicine practices, concierge medical practices in his career. And this interview is really, really interesting because not only is it a little less common that I have a concierge or direct primary care doc on the show, which I'm going to be having more of. In fact, there's another episode with one of my private practice mastermind members who he launched his DBC practice about a year ago, and that's going to be coming up in a few episodes from now. But it's really, really cool to see how he decided to start his practice, how it kind of morphed into something that he wasn't totally satisfied with, even though financially it was doing really well. And he ultimately decided to kind of mostly close the practice and take a couple year sabbatical. And what he did in that time, and then how he decided to start again in a new way. And so really a lot of lessons learned. And for anyone who's interested in this type of business model where, people are paying a much higher amount out of pocket in most cases for your care, there's just so many things that he mentions in here that are just absolutely vital to know and keep in mind. So this is a must listen for anyone who's interested in this business model of private pay healthcare. So with all that said, of course, I want to thank my sponsors, patientsites.com. If you're in the physical therapy realm and you want to have your website and most of your marketing, your lead generation and nurture taken care for you at a very fair rate, check them out, patientsites.com. Mention the podcast if you do decide to go with them, because it'll give you a really nice discount. So with all that said, guys, thanks again. As always, if you get anything out of this podcast, please do hop over to iTunes and leave an honest review. I would deeply appreciate it. And here is Dr. Morgan Camp.
Welcome, Dr. Camp. Morgan, it's been a long time, man. Before we even hit record, we didn't really talk about like the last time we saw each other when we first met, but we've probably known each other, 20 years almost.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about that a couple of days ago, Jarod. And I think it's been around 20 years.
Gosh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was at some point when I was in San Francisco back in the day to see Lama Ole and met you there. And yeah, it's been an interesting couple decades, right? Here we are with private practices and doing very different lives. Right. But thank you so much for taking the time. It's really great to see you, and I'm excited to have a concierge physician on the line with a unique scenario of actually starting a practice, taking a break, ending that, and then restarting again. And obviously, you just restarted your practice, kind of rolling right into a pandemic, and that's I'm sure will be interesting to talk about as well. Yeah. So why don't you introduce yourself and give a bit of background to the listeners and viewers on kind of your career to this point, as far as, why you decided to start your first practice and go, concierge or, out of network.
Right. Yeah. So I got my MD degree at Emory University. I was a chemistry major at Vanderbilt before then, Jarod. And I came out west to do residency at UCSF. I did a family practice residency and was never really quite happy with standard medical care for many reasons. And then after residency, I got a very good offer here at a prime clinic here in Mill Valley, California, where I now live. And it's just a prime area, so nice. And it was with some very cutting edge integrated functional medicine experts. So I got to go right into that office. It was a cash-based office, got to learn their systems, how they had everything set up, and got exposure to all these great patients and learned from that. And then I went, basically I was not there that long. Being always a little bit of a know-it-all, I said, I can do much better running a clinic than this. And went out on my own pretty quickly. And started my own cash-based practice here also, where then I learned over the next decade or so how hard it is to run a medical practice.
Yeah. Wow.
So learned a lot through that process.
And so what were some of the things that you learned early on? Well, before we get into the strategies that worked and didn't work, when I know that there's always a lot of listeners that are kind of thinking about getting started, and they know they want to change the way they're having to practice day to day, but for a variety of reasons, getting over that hump is difficult. So when you think back, and I know it was a long time ago, about when you got started, did you have any kind of initial challenges or emotional blocks or anything that kind of held you back, or was it just like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to just make it work? Or how did you experience that kind of on a more emotional level?
Yeah, good question. That was a challenge. When I started here at this practice in Mill Valley, I was all of a sudden, the doctor just out of residency. I don't remember how old I was, but not very old. Taking care of very successful, intelligent Bay Area executives and movie stars and famous, very famous people. So there was a lot of like self-value questions, like, oh my, am I worth this much money we're charging for these people? Do I know what I'm talking about? Can I do this, et cetera? So there were a lot of that I went through actually.
So how did you deal with those doubts, that imposter syndrome, especially being like relatively, new out of your residency and deciding to go into private practice, which a lot of people, or more people I'd say these days are doing that than before, and deal with exactly those doubts? Like, was it something that just went away over time, or did you actively do anything to deal with that?
Well, it was a little of both, and it took a long time, to basically charge for what I was worth. That was one reflection of that, right? To be able to have the confidence to charge what I was worth. But so there were many levels I worked through it. On one level was just becoming more of a nerd. Like, hey, these people actually know quite a lot about the subject they're here for, and I think I need to catch up. So I'd go to every conference I could. I tried to find every mentor I could. I read as much studies as I could, and really I would just dive in, to each patient's case more, spending a lot more time on them in the beginning than I was charging for, just to really like make sure I knew what was going on and to really research their case. And also, it's a tip that I learned that, often a lot of doctors don't actually do, but actually I learned to listen to my patients, like listen to them and really hear their story and to dive into their story and spend the time to get to know them and create a deep personal relationship with them. And I think that's really, what I think would be a key to my success is that I listen to people. I trust what they're saying. And if their story doesn't fit with what I was taught in med school, then I actually question what I was taught in med school. I question whether the paradigm in which we're always working and believing is actually true, or it could be that there's something else that I can learn in this situation that might actually help me with this patient here. So, so a lot of that. And also, on the other level, of course, I went through a lot of self-worth and self-validation issues through many processes, through many self-growth and transformation practices, and continue to do that to this day, of course. Never-ending process.
Is there a strategy that you feel like helped especially well with overcoming those fears and doubts about what you're providing and the value of what you're providing and what you charge for it?
Well, I think the biggest tip was just, paying more attention to to the successes that I was getting in my practice. Just like seeing that and listening to people. And when people were coming back and their problems were better, and just really being grateful for that and listening, when patients were offering me thanks and whatnot for what I was helping them with, actually hear it and receive it, which isn't always necessarily the case, right? So just really being more present in my life and really learning that, that people are actually quite grateful when we're helping, and to listen to and to learn to value myself and see myself as they were seeing me. Yeah.
Very good. And so you started your practice, and it sounds like you had a lot of, fairly high profile, clientele. How did you, I'm always thinking in terms of marketing and client acquisition and customer experience and all those kinds of things. Let's say someone out there wants to do something similar or it's going to be in an area where that's possible. What were some of the things that you found worked to attract that level of clientele where they're not as worried about the cost?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I was very lucky to join that initial very successful high-end practice, because that gave me exposure to that level of clientele from the beginning. And also some of them went with me to my next practice and brought their friends and their family members. So that was part of it, Jarod. And the other thing, is like, to go back and answer a little part of the question earlier, one of the things that really helped me stabilize my value and self-worth, and to have to overcome the fear to open the practice, was I also had a side business. Okay. I didn't just say, I'm risking everything, let's just put it all in here. Yeah. Because I don't think that's necessarily a recipe for success either, because then it's easy to go into fear that, hey, that's not going to work out. So instead, I worked ER and urgent care on the side while I built my practice.
Okay.
That gave me the money coming in, and then there's no rush. And then, I'm eating and taking care of my bills off of this while growing the practice, organically. So that saved me a lot of time and pressure, because I never did put a lot of effort into marketing. My marketing has always been just simply be a good doctor, take care of people, and the happy people will, refer more people back to me. If I had it to do over now that I know a lot more about marketing because of other businesses, I would have done it a little differently. And it's a lot easier now with digital marketing, I believe, to get your message in front of a select few easier.
Yeah.
But I never really had a lot of success. I mean, I tried Google AdWords and tried a lot of different things, but nothing really so successful. I had a few niche referral sources. Actually, that was probably the biggest key to my success. I really, especially being a physician, one of my specialties was treating parasites. So luckily, I had a colleague and a mentor who taught a lot of his students, because he was a teacher, how to test for parasites. And many of them were physical therapists and acupuncturists and chiropractors who couldn't write prescriptions. So he would so all of his students and himself would refer me his most difficult cases who they couldn't treat because they couldn't write the prescriptions.
Okay, that's nice.
So that helped me a lot. Nourishing those relationships helped.
Any kind of pointers for any type of practitioner, but especially concierge physicians or DPC physicians, on how you go about getting a foot in the door with those relationships? Not necessarily just like someone who's teaching about a specialty, although that's a great idea. It's who's actually teaching about the specialty that I have, but just relationships with referral sources in general. What were some of the things that you found worked well to develop those?
Oh yeah, good question. And first off, just go buy somebody a meal. I mean, first thing.
Doctors do that too.
Generate some goodwill in a relationship. Take somebody out to a meal. Get to know them on a personal level. I mean, several of those referral sources I got at the beginning of my practice are now some of my best friends.
Right on.
Who now work within other businesses and other ideas, and we have difficult cases. We talk about them. So just nourishing those. And I wish I had done more on a friendship level with many of those, actually. When I got really busy in my practice, a lot of time, there for a few years, I get so overwhelmed with so many things. I wasn't nourishing those personal relationships as much as I could have or should have. And I wish I had, actually, because I had a huge network of referral sources through that. And just through nourishing those, I would, if I could do it over again, I would probably send out some just little thank you gifts or cards to people, just little things to let people know how much you appreciate that they respect enough to send their patients to you. I mean, that's and especially in a cash-based practice, it's for them to do that. They've got to convince the person to come. I mean, it's a lot of effort, and probably for every one that comes, probably they refer to several that didn't.
Yeah, that didn't end up coming.
Yeah. So, I would really highly recommend that personal basis, nourishing those relationships on the referral sources.
So it sounds like, mostly direct referrals and word of mouth were kind of the keystone foundations of your initial practice. When someone would reach out as a prospective patient, right? Whether it's through word of mouth from other client or, from a physician or other practitioner, did you find that for a lot of those, you still had to work hard to kind of sell them on the idea of working with you, or what? I mean, and if so, in those situations, what did you find helped to actually get people over the hump, given, this is not something that their insurance is going to be covering, or at least you're not billing it directly for them?
Yeah, I take a little different approach there, Jarod. I have found that the difficult sales are usually the difficult patients.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had to talk about this because I have a new assistant a couple of days ago. And it's, if I'm trying to convince someone to overcome fears about seeing me or about questions in my practice, because I have a non-standard practice. So it's not, you're not coming to see a Kaiser doc when they come see me. If they have a lot of doubts about that before they come in the door, they're usually going to have doubts about that after the first visit and the second visit and the third visit. And those doubts are usually going to impede their actually healing process, I think. Not in every case, of course. I had a very well-trained staff, and, I gave them lots of good scripts. So I think the main message I learned was that what I wanted to do was make it clear who I was and what I was offering. And that way people who were looking for what services I had could find me easily. That's very different than people who might have a problem and they're just scanning the environment for somebody that might can help them, but they don't really know the skills and services I offer. And it's critical because I don't know. I mean, if your listeners are in niche markets, or if they're like standard therapists, but when you do anything outside the mainstream, what I've learned is I don't like to try to convince anybody that they should do anything I'm suggesting, because that just raises my liability, raises my headache factor, creates a lot more phone calls, emails, and text messages to alleviate their fears. I find it much better for me to be clear about who I am and what I'm offering, and then just allow people to find me based on it.
So a lot of your incoming prospective patients are kind of self-educated already, seeking out, I want somebody to look and be able to test for parasites and deal with that if I have it, or those specific things that you do differently. Most of them are looking for that service first, and then it's like, oh, this guy does that.
Exactly.
Okay.
A lot easier approach. Yeah, a lot easier stuff.
And you mentioned scripts and training of staff, which is a topic that comes up a lot, and I bring up a lot. And so, tell us more about that. What kinds of things were you instructing your staff to say or write if they're interacting with patients or prospective patients?
I mean, first off, number one, the right hire. Absolutely. I went through so many staff members, and it took me so long to learn this, Jarod. But hey, if somebody's got a question mark about somebody in that first week or two, hire
going away.
Off the door and hire somebody else immediately.
Yeah.
Right. It ain't going to get better if they're not, if they're struggling out the gate usually. And having that really amazing first person who's greeting everybody and answering those phones is critical. That's the representative for you and your face for the world. So I found that person was critical. Spend a lot of time nurturing that relationship. Again, that's one of the things I wish I'd spent more time on in the past. More like meals with staff, more meetings with staff, just educating them, because it's so hard for staff members actually to know what's happening behind the closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that information gap, like teaching them, like, here's what I do, and here's what I do. And just, I would encourage and still do encourage staff members to come to me. Bring me all the questions at the beginning. Every question you get on the phone, every question you get on email, let's go through how to answer those. And then after I answer enough for them, then they get the hang of it, and they start writing FAQs, and they start writing this down. And then, after you have that reference list of all the questions asked and good answers, then it makes it a lot easier. And that doesn't take too long to get that built up. And then once you have it built up digitally, then you get new hires, and it's relatively easy to transfer that information over to the next person.
Okay. Thinking back about your best staff on the phone, best receptionist, if you will. What separated, well, actually, it's not what separated them and made them best, or if you were able to look back at, what characteristics they had and what now, if you're looking for someone in that role, what are you looking for, if you're trying to fill that role now, so that the listener can because you and I both have dealt with clearly with subpar staff, and it's like, if we could, it's so costly. It's crazy, time and money wise. It's unbelievable. I have a course called automatedhiring.com. And it's basically a system where you set up Gmail filters and Google Forms and stuff, where no one that doesn't pay attention to detail and follow directions will even end up in your inbox, and you don't even have to look at their resume or anything. So like, I use that to filter people out, but then there's still easily the possibility that someone, who did read and follow directions is not going to be a great fit long term. And so, character wise, or what things do you look at or ask, or, what do you do to find that pivotal role in your practice?
First off, I love your little tests in your application process. I used to do the same.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yours is automated. I bet that's a good, good service you have there.
It is nice. Yeah.
My best staff were, I can think of just a couple. They were, in a couple categories. Either one, I just forget hiring someone forever. Just hire the absolute best, youngest, brightest person you can. So I hired pre-med students. My managers went to med school. Others are now super successful business people. They weren't going to be there long, and I knew that. But I was like, okay, I'm hiring the best. So that was one approach. The second approach was hiring someone who was in the demographic of the people I was trying to attract. So like, my best receptionist ever was someone local here who grew up here in this environment. And she didn't have desire to be super super She just loved being a receptionist. She was happy. She knew the people in this area perfectly. She knows how to talk to the high-end people. She went to high school with them. And she just fit in that demographic perfectly. So she didn't have any self-worth issues talking to them on the phone.
Right. That's a good point.
And I had others that did. So back to my own self-worth issues, if your staff has that too, then that's another barrier as well. Mm-hmm. So that she was definitely the best, because she just knew how to, she had no problems talking about any finances or money or anything on that. Yeah.
Okay. That's a great takeaway right there. It's just hiring, whoever they're going to be talking to, hiring someone who would be a patient themselves. Even, like right now, our admin was, interestingly, one of the very, very first patients of my practice 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago now. And I needed to hire someone, during the pandemic. I lost my admin. Basically her husband had lost his job, or, furlough kind of scenario, where she had to then get a full-time job that was, offering benefits. And I understood, these things happen. A lot of people, are in those kind of situations. And I put the word out, set up my automated filters and whatnot. And turns out like one of the first ones through was one of my first patients, probably like patient number 2 or 3. So I like that takeaway of like someone that's in a demographic who would use your services already, who doesn't have issues talking about money or spending money on high level healthcare.
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah. And on the other end of the spectrum, I also I had a weight loss business, a holistic weight loss business I created a few years ago, and I've sold it now.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a lower end practice. It was a cash pay, but very lower end cash pay.
Mm-hmm.
And in that demographic, it behooved me actually to hire someone in a lower demographic because they could relate to the exact demographic of the people coming in.
Right on.
Higher or lower in a class status, higher or lower in an economic status. Yeah.
Okay. Right on. So fast forward to kind of, you've had your practice for a number of years, and I know that at one point you decided to end that practice and take a sabbatical. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and what brought you to that point?
Yeah, that was a very difficult time, Jared, because I had gone through many health issues and I was burned out, and I needed a break. Long story short, I needed a break. I had a large patient volume at that time, and having gone through a lot of illnesses and recovery myself, I realized that I had, I was surrounded by a lot of patients who weren't getting better all of a sudden. Like my patients got better and for years and years, and that's how I built my practice, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like for some, a lot of it was through maybe some issues in the staff and in my life, et cetera. But a lot of the healthier patients disappeared, and a lot of the really ill ones who weren't getting better all of a sudden were just there all the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And all of a sudden going from like super compliant patients who were actually getting better and following the instructions to people that weren't. And also it was also just realizing that there were a lot of patients who were ill for many reasons, and they didn't really want to hear my solutions anymore. Because I was changing and transforming and realizing that a lot of my health issues were related to fears and stressors and psychological issues and familial patterns, etc. And that I was learning to address those, and that was helping me heal. But those people that I attracted in the past were still in that being a mirror to myself, which a lot of our patients are, right? They were in that older paradigm, and they weren't really wanting to look at any of those things like relationship patterns, etc. And they weren't really happy when I was suggesting them anymore. So I was burned out, and I was like, I just need a break for a while. Luckily, I'd done well financially, so I just decided to mostly close my practice. I say mostly because I was in I built my practice, so even when I had a cash-based practice, I still had residual income coming in from custom products that I made or other streams of income that I built into my practice. And so I maintained some of those streams of income and maintained relationships with the best clients.
Okay.
And because they, many of them struggled to find another doctor. And so they're like, well, you just take care of me even if only once a year. And I'm like, okay, sure. So that helped, so that gave me good, steady income for a while.
Okay. So it was an almost full close of the practice, but a few revenue streams and clients, and maybe were you able back then? Were you able to if you were traveling or whatever, you could do like phone calls or telehealth style stuff and maintain care.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I put boundaries, like when I would leave for a few months sometimes, and I was just not available then. But everybody knew that, and I'd already discharged them from the practice, legally. And so, I'd covered all those bases and of course it wasn't for anything emergent. It was just chronic.
Okay. Right on. And then, what were some of the highlights of that break? Did you see any cool places or do any cool things that really you felt like, man, I'm glad I took this break because of that experience?
Oh, I had an amazing time. I went to, spent a lot of time in Colorado and Utah, did some trips in the mountains there. I went to Peru for a few months, spent a lot of time in the Andes, hiking through the Andes. That was quite amazing, just going to some of the famous places there. I'd been to, after med school, I'd gone to Nepal for 4 months. And the mountains in the Andes and the Himalayas are two of the most inspiring places I've ever been to, for sure. And it was really interesting. The people of Peru, very similar dress and appearance and, energy similar to the Tibetans and the Nepalese, actually. So it was Peru, just stunning. The beauty, the food, the culture, the happiness of the people. really enjoyed my time.
Cool. And so how long did you take the sabbatical and take a break?
It was, I didn't go, it wasn't like one long trip.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really spread out over a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really interesting, Jared, because even after 1 year, I was like, okay, I'm ready to work now. But everything I tried to do just didn't work. Like I tried to, I had a couple of colleagues and friends who had practices. I tried to join theirs because I was like, I don't really want to run my own practice anymore necessarily. And I joined, I would get into discussions and then just like a sign would just appear like, do not do this, like clear message, like bad idea. And so, I was just sitting there like, what the heck am I doing? And then I just realized, okay, let's just be patient for the right opportunity. And then I actually did join a practice, actually rejoined the practice I originally was in many years earlier. And then, as soon as I joined it, I got another clear message like, nope, you're not supposed to be doing that either. And then I decided to just restart a concierge practice.
Okay. And was the model of your current practice essentially the same, or did you do things different the second time around?
Oh yeah, now very different. Now I just decided, I was like, okay, I would, in a perfect world, this is the income I need for my medical practice. This is how many people I want to take care of, how many hours a week I want to work on this. And I just did the math. So basically, I have a concierge practice where I charge people a retainer for I charge them a first month fee to onboard, which is critical for anybody out there considering a concierge practice. The first person I signed up, I didn't charge them that first month's fee. They had a very difficult case. I actually helped them get the difficult case resolved very quickly, and then they hired me.
Yeah.
And like, okay. So I learned a hard lesson there, but she's doing well, so I'm happy with that.
So you do. I know that the title concierge, and then you've got DPC, and some people you kind of combine a lot of those as synonyms, and some are like, no, those are very different. And obviously, the way that you kind of slice and dice the billing, or what they pay and when they pay it, is also highly variable from practice to practice. So you have an onboarding initial fee, and then do they also pay an annual fee at that point, or is it a monthly?
I make it very simple. I make it a monthly fee, and the contract. I have a contract, but the contract can be voided within 30 days. No long-term contracts. I don't want anybody in a contract with me if they don't want to be in a contract with me.
Sure.
Vice versa. And and most of the people who signed up, I'm in a great place because I already knew most of the people. They had been my former clients. So, I just had a discussion with them in advance, and here's the monthly fee, and and it's in the contract. We'll reevaluate it if your needs change, and all of a sudden you're requiring a lot more care than I'm giving, or at this fee, then we'll raise it.
Mm-hmm. So there's a set monthly fee. It's not necessarily based on age or any of that kind of stuff. But if they're needing a lot more care, you have the ability to say, look, this is more than X amount of visits and calls a month, and so we need to move you up to this level.
Exactly.
Have you had to do that with any?
I have. Yet? I had 2 or 3 people with COVID-related illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I invested a lot of time in them.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't raised it at all. It's also just they had just paid their large onboarding fee.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this
makes sense. Fun. Yeah.
And I've known them for a while. They'll probably will appreciate my care and stay with me for a while.
Mm-hmm. And how for those also looking at doing this, how did you run the numbers on decide on what the onboarding fee should be on top of the monthly fee? Or, not ongoing, but in the beginning.
Good question. I think I just decided how many hours I would need to invest in reviewing all the labs and giving them very long first meetings, like a 2-hour first appointment, an hour or 2, and maybe even an hour even before I meet them in person. So maybe an hour on the phone, then an hour or 2 in person the first time, order some lab work, another hour or 2 in person. So that first month, 6 weeks, like, 6 or 8 hours. So, I use that as a rough guesstimate.
You kind of cover that with what you want, what your, to your hourly fee is as an onboarding. And then after that first month, it's an ongoing monthly fee.
Exactly.
Okay.
On average, most people like monthly, 1 to 2 hours.
Okay.
Because that's what most of my clients need. Now, sure, there are a few more who are taking more or using more of my time now, but I'm also like, they're paying me well and my life is great now. So I don't mind giving a few extra hours here or whatever. I like it. I like it. It's actually quite, I like this part now. Now it takes away, it's like, no, it's nice. I'll order genetic tests on patients now and I'll dig into their gene profile, which can take a long time to go through all that data.
Yeah.
But it's fun, and it's me putting into their health and their relationship too. And then in a month or two later, when a problem appears, then I already know so much about them and their profile that I already have a good idea of who they are and what they need.
Right. And so how was this? Well, I want to ask one other question first and then ask about how it was different from before. So given your they're paying you on a month to month basis rather than like an annual fee scenario. How do you differentiate and define the term concierge as different than direct primary care?
Yeah, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
I don't either.
Yeah, cool.
I don't. Yeah.
I just know, I'm not sure where I stand on that either. But I know some people are like, oh, if it's a monthly fee, then that's DPC, and if it's annual, and I'm like, really? And then some will say, I've heard others in the field say, that DPC doctors on average will hold a higher number of patients and concierge or lower. And I think it just depends on who you ask, really, it sounds like. What are you at kind of your kind of maxed out goal level or and if so, or what is that number for you that you want to take care of?
Yeah. So my case is very unique, Jared, because I launched another business a year ago, which is something I'm putting a lot of effort into and really enjoying. So I just decided, like, while I'm growing my other business, what's a good number that I need to pay my bills and to so I can have abundance, basically, while also not hitting that level of patient volume where there's tiers of patient volumes, right? So at this level, I can have this much staff, and then if I go just this little bit, then I have to have that much more staff, and I have to have staff and manage those staff. So that's why I always think, like, what's that sweet spot for that amount of staff and that little overhead? And right now, I have a virtual assistant who works a few hours a week. That's it. She's available whenever. Nice. She's available whenever because she also works on my other businesses. So, I don't have to pay her much. And then I have another assistant from my old practice who takes care of stuff on the side too, because she has another business and she still knows all the old patients. So I keep my overhead at a bare minimum. My goal was to have 25 concierge patients. That's it. When I launched in January, and I think
January this year.
And I think I got, and just before COVID. I mean, I'm glad I did it not after COVID. I think I would look like a jerk if I did it then. But launching it then, I felt really good about that. And my goal was only to have 25, and I have around 15. So.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, my goal is to take a year to get that many. Now that I have 15, I'm not, I get a lot of requests now for more. And now, I'm very selective. Now I'm at that point, and that's a big thing to get across to your listeners is, learning, like, what does my ideal client look like? What's the personality of them? What kind of illnesses am I really good at treating? And listening really to my intuition when I'm listening to a prospective new client. Can I really help them? Can I really help them? And is this a win-win situation to bring them into my life? Because it's an intimate, when you're dealing with someone on that level, it becomes intimate, spending a lot of time with them, and it's my life. Do I really want to spend time with this person? I really think about those things, and I help them.
Okay. So aside from total patient load, how is the business structure of your current practice different than your previous one?
Well, yeah, my mentor, friend, colleague, Dan Kalish, who, he told me years ago, and he taught me so much, he told me years ago, he's like, Morgan, It's like, I tried to make money having large practices and, renting out, all this, like I'd have this many doctors working with me. And he's like, in the end, I didn't make any more money than if it was me by myself. So I didn't, me being the hard head, I needed to learn all that myself. So I went through that whole thing, hired all these people, and realized he was right. So now, long story short, I just keep the overhead as low as possible. Just keep everything on as low as possible. Business structure super easy. Now I just try to make things as easy as possible. Like I used to my staff, we would stock all the lab kits, we would stock all the supplements, we would try to take care of everything for people. Mm-hmm. And there's that, if I'd have one message for people in my position now, it would be like, all those things have to have value. If you're doing something for someone else and you've got to have real estate to stock those lab kits and you got to hire people to order them and track the results down and do all that costs a lot of money. And a lot of time and a lot of energy that you're paying for eventually. I mean, one of the reasons I got burned out is because I would be, bringing in, $100,000 a month and barely making the ends meet at the end of the month. I was getting paid last.
Yeah.
So now I do the opposite. Now I'm like, why do I need to offer that service? Like, there's now conveniences so easily online, like direct labs. I don't need to stock the kits anymore. I don't need to do anything. I can just send the link to the patient, say, order this lab kit and email me the results when you get them.
Nice.
And then I don't have to pay somebody to order the lab kit, mail the lab kit, track down the lab results, email the lab results, fax the lab results, all of that. All that's taken off of my plate.
So now I'm curious because so this direct labs or services like them, they'll send a kit to a patient and then they would have to take it to like a lab to get the blood draw or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, so they have, exactly. They have specialty kits, Jarod, that are like that. They also just have LabCorp blood draws.
Okay. But you still basically, if it's a blood draw, you got to get it somewhere else unless it's just like a finger prick or send in your pee or poop or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's good to know. I've been wanting to get some labs done.
It's so convenient. Yeah, there's a lot of services like that now. They don't require any doctor's order. Now, they're not available in every state, but I think 48 out of 50, I think.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's so convenient, and then I don't have to deal with it at all. It's just,
that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, why don't you, my business mind and gears are always turning. I always have at least two businesses at one time. It sounds like you as well, even in your past practice. So what is this other business that you're putting so much time into?
So about a year ago, I launched a supplement company. Mm-hmm. So we created a formula for anxiety. It's called Be Serene. Right now, it's our only supplement. We have another one in development right now at a manufacturer, and they're creating a sample for us. And we have sleep formulas being developed right now as well. So I'm working with a colleague of mine who's a PhD acupuncturist and some herbalist friends of mine. And basically, we're creating novel herbal formulations using Chinese, Indian, or Ayurvedic herbs and Amazonian herbs.
Oh, interesting.
So these are formulas that have never been used before. And the one for anxiety is working great. We're getting such good results. We have, hopefully we'll have a study going soon inside of a outpatient rehabilitation center to lower the recidivism rate of addicts.
Okay, fantastic.
The anxiety formula works so good for people that have, dizziness, lightheadedness, palpitation, things like that. And we've got a cream that we're creating that will work really quickly for things like panic.
Wow. Okay.
And cool. The website for that's b-serene.com.
Okay.
That's the company now. We have a larger company and a larger vision, which we're creating as well. And we're going to work with some technologies also for for neurological patterning, et cetera. So.
Oh, cool. I'm big into neurological stuff, so let me know when y'all get into that for sure, what y'all are doing in that area. For those, there may be a small number of them out there, but for those who are looking to go into the concierge medical model and are interested in something like this, where it's like, I haven't found like the supplements to exist to do exactly what I want or have certain components to it. What advice would you give to them if they were looking at making their own formulations of things? Is it like crazy difficult? I'm sure there's a lot of legal components to it, but what's your advice for anyone looking to potentially do that?
Well, there is, I know a lot of resources. There is a company called Customized Nutrients. I think there's two. Now, I can't remember. There's one called Personalized Nutrients and one called Customized Nutrients. They're sister companies. I don't remember which one's which. But in that, they have 500 ingredients, and you can mix and match and make your own. So you can make those either for your office use, and they make big batches for you, or you can make them just personalized for one person. Wow. So I do that for my niche patients. So, one thing we didn't talk about, which I would emphasize, is customer service.
Sure.
You're asking people to pay you a lot of money. You better take care of them. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways, I personally, the medical system is broken, right? There's no customer service. It's like, I've been a patient, even as a doctor, I get treated poorly in the medical system, So I'm like, really, how bad are other people getting treated out there? So one thing I always want to do is how can I make my patients' lives better? So I find the best pharmacies who give them the best customer service. Mm-hmm. And that's who I recommend. I find niche companies like this, like the customized nutrient, personalized nutrient companies. And those guys will take, so I can take an organic acid test or genetic profile test and come up with okay, this person needs these 10 nutrients. Go to that company's website, type those 10 nutrients in, decide the exact dose, click submit. 2 weeks later, my patient's got a customized vitamin for me with exactly the recipe I give them.
That's cool.
Right? Mm-hmm. And, and then they don't have 15 bottles to open. It's not necessarily cheaper, but, it's convenient. And a lot of, people are traveling or whatnot. They don't have 15 bottles and, one's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, doing things like that I found very useful, and people love that. Yeah.
Very cool. And the reason you've gone with your own formulations is just that these are totally novel kind of mixtures from different parts of the world. And
yeah, exactly.
No one's created it yet.
One of the herbs it's a tree bark from the Amazon called Malungu. It's barely available in the U.S. market at all. Yeah, there are no companies that use it.
Wow. Did you learn about that when you were in Peru?
Yeah, I did. That was part of it. And I had a sleep issue. I've had a sleep issue since I was a little kid that got much worse through med school and residency and the PTSD of that experience. And then I had a massive skiing accident, had a lot of pain.
I remember that.
So then I got addicted to Klonopin for a while, and then I was on gabapentin for sleep for a while, and then I went to Phenibut for a while. And so when I originally were going to create this product, we're trying to create a sleep product. Mostly to help, I'm like, well, I know a lot of my patients suffer from insomnia, and I do as well. So let me, put a lot of effort into creating a sleep formula. So the product we now have, Be Serene, actually started as a sleep formula. It doesn't work great for sleep, but what I found was when I took it at night, I didn't sleep great, but I woke up so relaxed and so happy that I was like, hey, I think people might like this. Then we researched more of the herbs, and we found out that it's better to take it during the day, and then it helps you sleep better at night. So it's an amazing anxiety formula, and now we're working with sleep formulas too.
Very good. Awesome.
And it helped me. It did help me. That the herbs in there did help me get off the gabapentin and the Phenibut, which I'm now off completely.
Awesome. Very good. Well, is there anything before we go that that we didn't talk about that you feel like you'd like to mention that it's important for anyone looking at going into, any form of cash pay healthcare practice? I know we covered a lot, but any kind of parting thoughts?
Yeah, there was one thing that, the one thing that helped me a lot, and again, this was a Dan Kalish recommendation, was, when you first meet somebody, get as much information from them as you can. Order labs. Get a vast landscape of labs. That way you have a solid blueprint for who they are and what their health issues are. And also it's an investment on their part into their health care. I'm a big believer that people get more out of their health care when they put more into it energetically. That doesn't necessarily have to be cash, but it can be going to the lab, donating some blood to the lab, giving your time, thinking, giving up of yourself to get that information is an investment in energy into your health. Mm-hmm. So I found when people do that actually they are then more committed to their health and to the process with you. And they were more likely to give me a longer period of time to work with them because of that.
Yeah. And then the results are that much better.
Exactly.
And then the word of mouth grows. So there's the multiple benefit.
Exactly. And when I was doing the opposite, like, oh, should I try? Like, I don't know if I'm worth this much. If I'm already charging this much for the office visit, and if I charge them, if they have to go get those labs, they're never going to do that. And then that's undermining myself, and like that's a negative fulfilling prophecy versus a self-fulfilling positive prophecy, and making like, okay, investing in their health makes them stick around longer, makes them feel more compliant, and just gives us more time. Yeah.
Right on.
Also, people like to see lab results too, oh yeah, that shows I have this,
Yeah. It's kind of like, imaging kind of helping to confirm what's going on in our world. And, as far as we as PTs, we don't do x-rays, in the clinic like chiropractors do, but that's a hell of a tool when you can say, look at this number or look at this curve or look at this thing. It's a hell of a tool to get them to act and make a decision to improve their health, through the services that you're offering. So I like that idea applied to the medical model as well. To the physician model.
That makes perfect sense because I'm sure that you and many of your colleagues and listeners don't always need those scans. Your diagnostic skills, your hands and your experience, you already know what's going on, but by removing that doubt in the patient's mind, you're actually giving them more confidence in you as the healer, right?
Yeah. And what the answer is gonna need to, or what they're gonna need in order to get to the goals that they have. So, well, that's fantastic, man, and a great one to end on. Again, thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to meet up in this way, and I hope it's not too long before someday we can see each other face to face.
Absolutely, Jarod. Look forward to that very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cash-Based Practice Podcast. If you liked what you heard here today, we have some extremely important things we want to send you. First, a quick start guide to cash-based physical therapy and Medicare. This free ebook will provide the primary rules and regulations surrounding this confusing but important topic. Secondly, we want to share with you the 5 characteristics common to all successful cash-based practices. Find out the vital things Jarod has learned from years of interviewing cash practice owners and running his own successful cash practice. As one of our listeners, we want to give you all this information absolutely free. You can get it right now by going to drjarodcarter.com/success. Again, that's drjarodcarter.com/success. Go there now to get your copies, and we'll see you next time.